This is The Zero Hour with RJ Eskow, produced by the WEAC Radio Network in Washington, D.C., and broadcast across the nation. Visit us online at thisisthezerohour.com or at youtube.com/thezerohour. Ladies and gentlemen, RJ Eskow.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to a special edition of The Zero Hour. It is Sunday, August 17th, 2014, and events continue to proceed in Ferguson, Missouri, following the shooting of an unarmed teenager last week. And as the story proceeds so quickly, I think we are all very much in need of context as well as information. So this special edition of The Zero Hour is produced by the WEAC Radio Network, we have some folks on the ground there in Ferguson, and sponsored by Credo Action. And we are going to spend the next hour trying to give you both context and information. To begin with, we're going to speak with Reverend Osagyefo Uhuru Sekou, who is from that part of the world, from the St. Louis, Ferguson area. He's currently the pastor for Formation and Justice at the First Baptist Church in Jamaica Plain, Massachusetts. He was born there. He has returned to Ferguson to organize on behalf of the Fellowship of Reconciliation, the largest, oldest interfaith peace organization in the United States, one I know well, helped me begin my activism career as a teenager, actually. He is also he's spent some time studying riots in London and England, and is the author of the forthcoming Riot Music, British Hip-Hop, Race, and the Politics of Meaning. Reverend Osagyefo Sekou, thank you so much for joining us.
I am so privileged, and I want to say thank you, Brother RJ. You all have been here, being witness and doing the work of the fourth estate, which is the whole corporate elites and governments accountable. And so, just thank you for living out the true meaning of journalism.
Well, I'm honored to have you say that, and my only personal regret is that I can't be there in person, but we certainly have got some folks there, and we believe it is very, very important. We believe, and I want to get your thoughts on that it is that these moments where conflict bubbles to the surface, perhaps becomes visible to people who don't see it, but for other people, for large swaths of our population, this conflict is a day-to-day reality. And I think we hope that out of tragedy perhaps can come a teaching moment for the entire nation. And do you believe that's possible?
Well, there's a fancy word that they taught me in seminary called kairos, when God is breaking into history. And so this may be one of those moments where something is happening because these young people have taken to the street and bore witness to the misery that they've experienced daily, high levels of unemployment, high levels of police brutality, low levels of opportunity. And so this moment, as you stated, is a moment where the world might know what the day-to-day realities of particularly young black youth are in America.
Well, and to that purpose, to that higher purpose, I understand you've returned to Ferguson on behalf of the Fellowship of Reconciliation. Is that correct?
Yes. The Fellowship of Reconciliation is the nation's internationally celebrating its 100th year, the nation's oldest peace organization. FOR has done an amazing amount of work in terms of keeping track of social movements. It led the creation of CORE, the Congress of Racial Equality, led the first freedom rides in 1947, dispatched the great Bayard Rustin in 1955 to Montgomery, and continues to do work, including leading delegations to Palestine, which I was a part of in 2012. And so so I've been dispatched as a fellow for them, as well as an ambassador for them in various places around the world. But even more than that, I was born in St. Louis, Missouri. I went to high school here, graduating from Soldan High School in 1989. And then I have children here. I have sons here. And so I want them to look at me and at some point when they ask, when they were killing people like us, Dad, where were you? And I want to be able to say to them with some integrity that I was there defending you and trying to make the world a little bit better than I found it.
Well, and that's deeply moving, and I have to say that it does my heart good to hear the name of the Fellowship of Reconciliation again. They, back in, I would say, 1969, when I was in junior high, then high school, I lived near their headquarters. I don't know if they're still headquartered in Rockland County, New York, but in Nyack, right?
You lived in, yes. Shadow Cliff is our headquarters, yes.
So I was a student activist in those days, and we were trained there and inspired there, and Conrad Lynn, I believe, was there at the time, and a number of other great peace activists. So it does my heart good to know that in those days we were struggling both on the civil rights front, but of course with the Vietnam War. Now we have, which is something I wanted to discuss with you, Reverend. I mean, I think we have the sense. It's interesting to me, in those days, when I was young, it was Vietnam and it was civil rights, and it was, but there was a domestic and a global aspect to the struggle. And now you mentioned having gone to Palestine, and in an earlier broadcast, I mentioned the fact that Palestinian people were actually tweeting their support to the people of Ferguson and telling them how to avoid tear gas and so on. I mean, sometimes parallels don't work, sometimes parallels are wrong, but is there kind of one struggle going on now, or is this a connection too far?
Well, no. I mean, the reality is that we live that in that ever popular era, that word that we use so much called globalization. And so globalization is not only about the international flow of capital, but it is also globalization both in terms of struggle and resistance, both parallels. But those parallels are not in abstract at this moment. The police chief of Ferguson was trained by Israelis. The Pentagon, which provides resources and ships armament to Israel, is the same police force and the same Pentagon that distributed instrumentalities of militarization vis-a-vis these urban tanks, these machine guns that are being used and pointed at, and the tear gas that are being used and pointed at children. And I say children here in Ferguson are the same one that are being pointed at in children in Palestine. And so there is a direct connection both in terms of material resources as well as the spirit of this thing, in terms of the spirit of domination, the spirit of militarization, the spirit of impoverishment is all at work, both in Palestine and in Gaza, and the connections are materially clear as well as existentially clear.
And this is so much, Reverend Sekou, of something I wanted to discuss with you also, because I think, people sometimes think, well, we've got to deal with the concrete situation, and what you're talking about is abstract, but this gets very real. I mean, I think, they used to have a saying that if you give a man a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And we have the situation where we had to have all the surplus military equipment and so on going to the police forces around the country. We have the Department of Homeland Security giving other, tanks and anti-personnel vehicles and all that business. And so, I think that it's real, isn't it? I mean, when we talk about the militarization of America's streets, our listeners who might live in suburbs or the countryside might not feel that, but I think in the inner cities, people do feel increasingly that it's almost more like an occupation than a community police force working with. Is that correct?
Yeah, no question that people are. I was in Palestine in 2012 and was part of a protest in Nabi Sela, and my feeling, like my visceral feeling, right? So I got Palestine in about 15 minutes, like just being in Palestine. I was like, oh, I know this. This. And so I said to the Palestinians who were there, I was like, oh, I got it. Y'all are the niggas. And so I got it in 15 minutes. That same feeling beyond the materialities of tanks. So that's on Friday night when protesters were tear gas. A group of us went out, clergy, and held the line between protesters and the police, the militarized police force, 4 armored tanks, about 25 police in riot gear with machine guns, pointing them at reporters, pointing them at young people. We're negotiating between the protesters and the police, and that feeling in my gut was the same. I was like, I know this feeling, and it was when I was in Palestine.
You
So
know,
it's not an abstract. And then just think about it is an indictment on our nation that we have surplus weaponry to give to policing systems throughout the state, but Ferguson does not have its own high school.
Right.
Right. It is an indictment on this nation, right? That we have a surplus of bullets and guns to share with them, but we don't have opportunities for young people and who are unemployed, right? So there's a surplus in in materialism and a deficit in opportunity.
And this is where I think a lot of people who are not living in these communities need to maybe take a step back and think about the things that they've been taught as assumptions are false. You know, I mean, one of the things that I learned at the Fellowship of Reconciliation those many years ago was not to dehumanize those who stand against you, but to understand that they have misconceptions that have led them to where they are. And one of those misconceptions is, you know, I reviewed 60 Minutes did a thing last year, counterinsurgency cops, about how the way to police our communities is by acting like the counterinsurgency forces in Iraq. Although, by the way, military people have been saying that these are much more severe in their actions, these police, than they would have been. But really, people don't realize, for example, crime is actually falling in our cities, and what we need is help to combat poverty, help to create opportunity, and all of those things. So how do we, as those of us who are in the media, for example, how do we, you know, it's easy for, I can certainly criticize a 60 Minutes for glorifying the counterinsurgency cop and the militarization of our police force, but what do we do to get the positive message out that says that you all who think this way are mistaken, and here's what you need to understand?
Well, part and parcel of what we're wrestling with is a tradition of struggle. And a tradition of repression, right? Like, you know, our dear friends over at Fox News often act as though America just fell out of the sky with a black president and a multiracial democracy. The way in which I can have this conversation with you, right, in often multicultural contexts, with some belief that I won't have experience arbitrary violence. Now, the reality is that the Malcolm X grassroots organization, our dear friends over there, Lumumba Bandela and others, have noted to us through their report 2 years ago that every 28 hours, some black person is shot down like a dog in an extrajudicial killing by some form of a policing or security agency in the United States. And in most of those instances, those people are not prosecuted. So this is not something new. This is something that people live under every day. But part of what the media should be highlighting is telling a real narrative about the ways in which people are resisting. Right. So casting young people, right. So although there was some looting, I saw some of that. That was a small group. But what the story that the media didn't tell is that young, primarily black men, after the stores were initially broken into, went and stood in front of those stores and said, "You cannot do this. This is not honoring Mike Brown." Right. That story was not told. The story of us negotiating between riot police and protest so that young people could engage in their democratic right to oppose forms of repression in this nation that is the hallmark of the founding of America in terms of forms of resisting, right? That they can tell those stories. They can tell the story of Pastor Renita, who has been out praying with young people and who's just trying to speak into them life and reminding them that they matter, right? That story is not being told. And so part of what the media has to do is to usurp and get out of the pen. Not at one level, the media cannot continue to cooperate with the policing of free speech because they were pinned in last night. So we really couldn't see what was happening, except for those like yourself who were live streaming. And so the media has a moral and ethical responsibility to be the fourth estate, to hold accountable the corporate and governmental elites, and to ensure that there's an informed citizenry. That is a moral obligation of the media, and if we do not have them engaging in that, then our nation and our world will suffer for it.
Well said. And Reverend Sekou, what do you think will happen now? Do you have any idea? And what will you be doing in the next day or two there in Ferguson? I mean,
I personally made a tragic mistake of leaving last night. And, if there's, some social justice God I can repent to, I will, right? In terms of, I was part of, not in leadership, but I'm here supporting. I'm trying to support folks who are here on the ground. And we wound up buying into, because we were in the press conference yesterday about 2 p.m. at Greater St. Mark's Family Church, in which Captain Ron Johnson, who I feel is a good man, and he loves his community and loves his people, but seems the case that he cannot negotiate in a real way with the state powers of which he is a part of as a police person, told us that they would not use tanks, and then they would not use tear gas, and they did both. They did that last night, and so many of us who encourage young people to go home thought that we were done, thought that it was going to be safe and they were going to be okay. That did not happen last night. And so clergy are going to continue to go out, and I'll be part of that group. Folks from PICO are down here, Amnesty International, the Service Employees Union, Jobs with Justice, the Organization of Black Struggle, and other organizations like here, local-led organizations. There's a group of peacekeepers. And let the truth be spoken, that the Nation of Islam, for all of our critique of them, in many of these instances, if they were not here corralling, protecting young people, there would have been massive slaughter. Right, because and again, this is not abstraction. This is not conjecture on my part. I'm saying Friday night, I personally had 25 machine guns pointed at me. Right, so this is not abstraction. So this is not. I'm not. This is not hyperbole. This is not speculation. I'm saying I know for myself that and that there were drones. Right, I know all of that. And so we are in a situation whereby we find ourselves suffering under a certain kind of tyranny, but the people will resist. And that part of what we need to understand is that these young people who are, being called names and all of that, they're the only reason we're paying attention to this. They're the only reason. They took to the street. Some of them engaged, a limited number of them engaged in property damage, right? And that's become the story. And we forget about the fact that they shot this baby like a dog, left him in the street for 4 hours, did not contact his family, and or the EMS, and then put his body in a SUV that his body. So not only did they disrespect him in murder, in death, they disrespected his body by putting it in the back of an SUV, and now they're engaging in a third assassination, which is a character assassination. And so all of that is going to continue to fuel resistance among young people. It's the same thing that I saw with Mark Duggan and the London riots, right? That they killed him, lied, media picked up a narrative to a character assassinate him, and then continued to try to craft a story. And the crafting of that story, the media and the government officials in collusion are attempting to articulate a simple truth to us in terms of their notion of truth. So a simple lie that they are articulating is that he is a nigger who deserved to be murdered. And that,
right. And
go ahead.
And for those of us in the media, I mean, it's complex because yes, it's tragic that this young man was about to start college when he was died, but he doesn't have to justify being alive to anybody. So
yeah, exactly.
The fact, whether or not he was going to go to college, he was a precious child, and whether or not he took a box of cigars and paid for it or didn't pay for it or whatever. He was a precious child, and he had no right to be treated like, his family had no right to be treated like that. They deserved justice. They deserved fairness. He deserved to live. So I don't know how else to do it in my job, except to say that over and over again. This was a child who deserved to live, who was shot, who was killed. Justice must be done in this case.
Yeah. And if it wasn't for independent journalists like you all, there's a brother I have not met. I'm dying to meet, Tiff Poe, who is a local rapper who's been tweeting about this the whole time. We want to say thank God for Black Twitter. And actually the founder of Twitter is here. But for Black Twitter, for keeping the story alive, and for those young people who have consistently borne witness. And let's be clear, often people are saying, well, they're breaking the law by breaking the curfew. Every resistance movement in the United States was a resistance movement whose one of its chief activities was to defy the decrees of the state. And so the curfew is immoral and it is unjust, and that these young people are going to continue to resist it.
Well, I'll tell you, I guess we can just close with this, but I was in South Africa last year. I've been to South Africa twice, and they know a little something about resisting curfews and travel laws, a ban on movement there, and how that's a part of the struggle for justice. And I guess I would just close. Thank you so much for joining us, and I would just close, I guess, by saying, do you have any final words for us?
I mean, there are so folks know there are a number of organizations around the country who are mobilizing. There's some deep organizing happening on the ground with the Organization of Black Struggle, PICO, and other organizations on the ground here figuring out a way that they can serve the interests and the needs of the people. One of the major things that we need to call for is an indictment of this officer. He needs to be indicted and go before the court of law to give an account to what his extrajudicial murder of Mike Brown. That the pressure needs to be on, and then secondarily, there needs to be a continued critique and defiance of the curfew in such a way that young people are safe and cared for. There needs to be folks need to be dispatched to help these babies in all of this trauma. Right?
Right.
That they're hurting, like you constantly heard on the street from these people. They were crying, we're tired, we're hurting, just screaming and loving them. And so if young people choose to defy the curfew, we need not demonize them for that. We need to love them, we need to care for them, and we need to be with them. And then we need the media to consistently tell that story.
Well, and thank you so much. Our love and support goes with you as you are out there doing those things with them. Thank you for doing that. Thank you for representing all of us on that. And also give my love and memory to the Fellowship of Reconciliation. We've been talking with Reverend Osagyefo Sekou, who is down on the ground there in Ferguson. Thank you so much for joining us, Reverend.
Bless you.
Thank you. We will be right back after this. I am Richard RJ Eskow, and this is The Zero Hour. we are back on the Zero Hour. This is a special Zero Hour report on August 17th, 2014, on the situation in Ferguson, Missouri. We have people on the ground there, and we are also live streaming. This presentation is sponsored by Credo Action and produced by the We Act Radio Network. And joining us now is Justin Duckham from Talk Radio News Service. He is here to tell us he was in the middle of the crowd last night when the curfew ended and the tear gas started flying, and I believe he was actually tear gassed himself. We'll hear more about it. Justin, are you with us?
Yes, I am. How are you doing, RJ?
I'm doing all right. How are you? How are you doing? Did you get tear gas last night? You feeling okay?
I did. Luckily, we had a kind of senior reporter over there who had been in these kind of situations before and was sort of guiding, some of the newbies throughout the night. And right before it went off, he advised us that if we did not have gas masks, to make sure that we had our noses and mouths covered with, anything we could find. I had a backup trash bag that I was using for a poncho since it was raining pretty heavily that night, and I was able to cover my mouth and nose with that. So I got, quite a bit in the eyes. I still kind of have the bloodshot stoner look going on today. But overall, I'm fine.
All right. And obviously, there's somebody last night is far less than fine. There was a shooting after the curfew was imposed. Is that, or was it before? What are the details on the shooting? What do we know about that?
Okay, so from what we learned from Ron Johnson last night, he gave a press conference following the police action. He told us that the police action was not actually in response to the violation of the curfew. He said that after the curfew had ended, police intelligence learned that there had been a number of armed individuals in the Red's Barbecue restaurant, which I'm sure your viewers of a live stream kind of recognize now since it's sort of a small strip, who were inside it as well as on the roof. And that apparently escalated the situation. Once that was, made available to police, according to Johnson, they decided that they had to disperse the crowd as quickly as possible, and that's when the tear gas flew. I believe after that is when the shooting took place, and when that happened, I had, been gassed, so I had run for shelter behind a building across the street from the barbecue restaurant, and when we emerged to try to get back on the scene, that's when, we started to hear at least one gunshot. I believe it may have actually been several, but the police are, not saying how many shots may have been fired. And so that happened probably about 5 to 10 minutes after the second tear gas canister had gone off.
So now we're approaching, I guess, 1 o'clock your time. And do we know yet who did the shooting or who was shot?
Last night we were trying to get some information over, who did the shooting. Was it a, police-involved shooting? Captain Johnson wouldn't, tell us that. He said he did not have that information. I've actually been on a plane for a good chunk of the day, so I haven't been able to check the headlines. But as of last night, we do not know who the, suspect may have been. We do know that he was not, in fact, apprehended. The 7 arrests that did take place were for failure to disperse, so they were protesters, not the armed individuals in this situation. But we still don't really have much information, or we didn't, at least last night, have any information about the shooter or the victim, who police could not confirm was a protester or not.
Do we know for a fact that it was not the police who did the shooting?
We do not. Or at least we did not as of last night. When we tried to get that answer from Captain Johnson, he did not provide, a straightforward response to that.
We also heard, and it may be that you're not in a position to answer these, but we also heard that it was actually the crowd that got the injured person to some medical help. I don't know if you have any details.
Yes. There were protesters who ended up taking the individual to the nearby hospital where the wounded person is now in critical condition, or was at least as of last night, and that was confirmed by the police. And they said that they had actually established lines of communication with some of the protesters who decided to defy the curfew last night, and they coordinated with the police to get that person to safety.
Justin, when you were at the press conference with Captain Ron Johnson last night, right?
Yes, I was.
Do you get this? The picture that comes across through the media and Twitter and everything else is that there's kind of a civil war going on among these various police forces here, that there's significance, and the Department of Justice, that, the Department of Justice didn't want Ferguson police to release the video or information about the cigar store incident, but they did it anyway. Captain Johnson said there wouldn't be tear gassing, and there was tear gassing, and so on. Is there sort of anarchy on the law enforcement side here, you think?
That's a very good question. From what we saw last night, in the lead up to the curfew being imposed, there was, apparently very little communication. I tried to, get confirmation over what exactly was happening at around 7 o'clock when they started blocking off West Florissant Avenue, and nobody that I spoke to could, give me a straight answer. And actually, one officer told me that, they have no idea what's going on. So. For all of the good work that Ron Johnson's doing, it doesn't necessarily seem like everybody's on the same page about this.
Right. That's what I was wondering. And now you were saying you're on an airplane, so you've gone home now?
Yeah. I was just scheduled to stay there until early this morning, since I have to be back in D.C. tomorrow, or today, or tomorrow. Yeah.
So somebody's relieved you, I guess, and taken your place, maybe, or?
No. We're a pretty small operation, so I just wanted to go down there and bring our listeners at least a little slice of the front line and what's happening down there. But we do not have another talk radio person down there. But potentially due to people like you and a lot of other people who are providing some great live streams, you guys are doing some great work, and you're really getting the sense of what it's like on the ground over there to the people who really need to know about it.
Well, thanks. And we're all going to have to work together on this to get this story out. So, Justin Duckham from Talk Radio News Service, thanks so much for joining us and giving us an update. And glad it wasn't any worse. I hope your eyes get all better soon.
Hey, thank you so much, RJ. Keep up the good work.
You bet. Thank you. And we will be right back after this on the special zero-hour report on the situation in Ferguson, Missouri. We will have more to come, more information for you after this very brief break. I'm Richard RJ Eskow, and this is the Zero Hour. And we are back on the Zero Hour with our special report on the situation in Ferguson, Missouri. It is brought to you by the We Act Radio Network, sponsored by Credo Action. This Zero Hour special report. Joining us now is Mike Batchman, who's a local leader and works with an organization called BASIC Basic, and he's been there on the ground, experiencing the situation firsthand alongside our own folks there. Mike, thanks so much for joining us.
I appreciate your time, allowing me to speak on the situation today here at St. Louis and Ferguson, Missouri.
Well, we want to hear what you have to say. And first, could you just give our listeners a little bit of what BASIC is all about?
BASIC is an acronym that stands for the Black Alcoholic Service Information Center. It has been in existence since for the last 31 years. It's a community-based organization founded by our director, who is Over Miller Sr. Our whole concept is based on a non-traditional approach to drug and alcohol treatment that's specifically designed for the inner city or the black community. We feel that we have a unique set of circumstances. We have a unique problem as far as drug and alcohol abuse is concerned. And we've understood that traditional models really don't work for the African American community. So Mr. Miller has over the last 31 years, come up with treatment strategies that are specifically designed to assist minorities in overcoming alcohol and drug abuse. We boast an alumni that has been in existence for 29 years. We actually are the only program in the Midwest and maybe the country that is not only culturally specific, but we're gender specific also. We actually have two programs all males program and an all women's program that are directly across the street from each other in St. Louis, Missouri.
So as a result of your work in that area, you know the community well, you know the issues of the community well, and you've been spending time now perhaps as a result, there in Ferguson, dealing with the situation there. And what do you think's happening next? They imposed a curfew last night, and our feeling was that was a very bad idea, that was criminalizing, in effect, the presence of the people in this community, and after a certain hour. But, there's different ways to look at it. Do you think that was responsible for inflaming the situation last night?
Oh, definitely. They were really targeting a population of young men who we at Basic work with on a daily basis. When you see that type of behavior, it's really a voice that's not being heard. They're acting out in frustration, anger, or sometimes violence. And we deal with young men who are on probation, parole, undereducated, underemployed, poor housing, poor medical access, all those things that really are the undercurrent to what you're seeing there. For the most part, during the course of the days that I've been spending there, and I've been spending long hours from 8 o'clock in the morning to 12 o'clock at night, each night, and watching the community galvanize itself, watching the different protesters coming in from out of town or the local inhabitants here, coming together for a common cause. Once that element has subsided, and the rain caught us last night, the other element that is coming out are our youth, the underserved population. They're angry, they're frustrated, and when you show a show of force as such as they do at that time of night, tensions are high, and they're looking at our young men as the enemy, and they're really not. Right. They just want to be heard. For many years, I've heard young men come into our organization and say, we're at war. And I always ask them, who are you at war with? And they always say the police. And because they never have a positive interaction with police here or across the country, per se.
And I know that Captain Ron Johnson was trying to change that, and a very powerful man, powerful personality. But you get the sense watching this situation from a distance that there's, and I mentioned it a few minutes ago to another guest, it's almost as if there's a civil war among the police right now. That you've got Captain Johnson trying to handle it one way, but then you've got perhaps the Ferguson Police Department trying to handle it another way, and now you got St. Louis in there too. Is that a fair description?
There's a definite division between the police department versus Ferguson Police, County Police, and the Highway Patrol. There was a gentleman that was on TV earlier yesterday whose store had been looted. He called the 911 to Ferguson Police. They referred him to the County Police. The County Police referred him to the Highway Patrol, and the Highway Patrol referred him back to the Ferguson Police Department. So there is.
It seems like the Ferguson police they're resentful that it's gotten taken away from them. They're trying to get it back, and I even saw there was on CNN the other night when Captain Johnson was first brought in. Captain Johnson was standing shoulder to shoulder with a African American. I forget what he's called. A commander and one of the a police officer, but an African American police officer from Ferguson, standing with Captain Johnson, and then the head of the Ferguson police was kind of trying to intrude in between the two of them to speak, even though he wasn't originally even part of the interview. And that seemed to me like the visual metaphor for like how the Ferguson police and how the leadership of it, that they were really trying to get community leadership the community could relate to, and someone like Captain Johnson, being African American, being so much more compassionate and so on, but that this guy was trying to inject himself back in the situation of control. And I'm just wondering if that's part of what we're seeing here.
The reality of it is they're using, and he's a wonderful brother. I've met with him personally on the street during our interactions. He's very sincere about it, but his hands are tied. They're just using him as a pacifier, someone that the community could relate to. They say, okay, he's a brother from the community. He's lived in the community before. He's like us, but they have given him no power. I remember Friday morning when they did the press release with the first chief of police who decided that they wanted to give out the police officer's name, Darren Wilson. And he had a packet that he gave to some of the newscasters, things of that nature. Later on, Captain Ron Johnson came. He didn't have one. They didn't give him. He didn't even have privy to knowing that there would be a newscast at that time at Ground Zero. And he was visibly upset because he couldn't answer any of the questions that the community had asked him because he didn't have the information. Another thing that has happened is that they say that this is an ongoing investigation and that they couldn't give information out at this time, but yet they provided a video of Michael Brown altercation at the store. I thought that was part of the ongoing investigation. So why would you give out that type of information or evidence without providing additional evidence from the other side? So it's a play on words at this time. It's a play on a community that's very conscious. We're not blind, deaf, and dumb here in St. Louis to what's going on. I've been in St. Louis. I'm 66 years old. Been here all my life, and I know that St. Louis is in the surrounding areas. And I want to say that because we got about 40 municipalities surrounding St. Louis. St. Louis is the most racially divided city in the United States. Clearly defined. 95% of South Side is white, and 95% of the North Side is black. And most of the news that is being assimilated on our newscast is all about the North Side, North St. Louis, the hot spots, things of that nature. Well, the hot spots and the things that they talk about are the young men that you're seeing out there today standing up at the end of the evening, not only during the protest, but at the end, at night, confronting the police officers because they want to stand up for their rights and they want to be heard.
Right. And one of the things, why do you not, in a city like Ferguson, why do you not have a police force that reflects the community? Why do you not have a head of a police force that reflects the community? How did that situation come to be? He almost seems like an antagonistic figure who's trying to make this, I don't want to judge him. I don't know the man, but this Captain Jackson, I believe his name is, the local, the Ferguson police, it almost seems like he's trying to antagonize, inflame. Yeah. Why do you have him in charge?
Well, the reason why is because St. Louis is a very, I'd say, moderate city. It's slow to come about. We're in the Midwest. We have a Midwestern mindset. Ferguson is a very old city with very traditional ways, methods of doing things. And the city fathers who run Ferguson are really pretty set in their ways, and they want to see things the way they've always been. This is nothing new as the Ferguson Police Department. My father-in-law, he was actually back in the 70s, 80s, early 80s, was the first black police officer in the city of Ferguson. And he was the only one until he retired. So it's traditionally speaking, Ferguson has always been that, but at that time, majority of it was a white population. Since the migration, it's along that north corridor that I was talking about going into the county, that Ferguson, the migration of blacks moving into the county areas during the 80s and 90s, and the apartment complex is not a housing project. It's an apartment complex that Michael Brown was killed in, which is predominantly black at this time. But it's set off to the side. There's really only one way. There's two ways in and two ways out. But it's a community that those strip malls feed off of or provide services to. But it's predominantly black over there in that area. But they're having white police officers come in. And Ferguson, these small municipalities also, there's not something that's not being said. We don't get the best police officers at these small municipalities because of budget, things of that nature. So, if you graduated from school, did you graduate at the top of your class, at the bottom of your class? Well, many of these police officers didn't qualify for county or other, St. Louis City. So they are accepted in these small municipalities. Where
And
most
yet
of the
they...
revenue, pardon?
Go ahead.
And most of the revenue generating capacity is based on traffic stops, stopping them for traffic violations and charging them enormous fines for not having your proper license plate or proper registration. And these small municipalities, if you go to the city halls on court day, there's 200 or 300 people standing in line to pay these enormous fines. And this is why, so it's all about revenue generating, and it's preying on a population that is underserved, financially strapped, minimum wage jobs, moderate jobs, not the upper echelon of our society. But that's who they put on for their revenue.
And as we've said so many times in this broadcast here, treating them like an enemy or a force you have to occupy, a population you have to occupy rather than your own community. So what do you think is next, Mike? We got tonight coming up. We got this curfew situation. What are you going to be doing tonight?
I'm a lion. I'm never going to retire. I've been fighting the fight. I was in the civil rights movement back in the 60s as a teenager. I'm not going to end this. My mission is to assist in uplifting fallen humanity. I'm a Muslim. I was at the mosque earlier today, and I was listening to the Minister for Directions, Minister Farrakhan for Directions. We have civic leaders. We have community-based leadership here in St. Louis that you really don't hear about, that's on the ground every day. Basics is a part of that. We're on the ground fighting this fight in our community every day to strengthen it, uplift it, educate it, properly educate our young men and women in the process, and hopefully get them. The ground has to be prepared before the seed is planted. And, there's a lot of tilling to do at this time to properly educate them through our wisdom that we've obtained from our own personal experiences, and hopefully guide and direct that energy that they possess today, the youth. I was sharing with one of the brothers earlier, I wish I could bottle it because there was so much energy out there, but to properly channel it, that's going to be our challenge. But I know we can do it. I know we can, because I think for the most part, except for that small population, and I'll be honest with you, I really know that small population. Like I said before, I deal with them every day. I understand their hurt, their pain, the frustrations that they're going through. So we have to be patient, but we're not going to stop, and we're not going to end this. This is a movement, and hopefully St. Louis could be the architect of a new world order as far as our young children and how we need to address them and raise them, and to be able to give them some. One of the things I've noticed is that in our community here, our young men, they've taken away their imagination. They can't imagine doing anything or doing anything at this time. They really struggle with nihilism, where life has no meaning, no purpose, no love, and no hope. And when you walk out in that world of despair feeling like that every day, then this is the results of what is going on. That is the way that they are able to express themselves, as I said. When we're not being heard, our voice becomes frustration, violence, and those things that we see. But it's not going to end. I want to give. I really want to give honor and respect to a brother by the name of Anthony Shaheed. Many people have seen him on the news and with the chains around his neck and the dogs. But this is a brother who has been fighting the battle here in St. Louis for the last 30 years without stop. And I want to commend him for it, and I want to let the rest of the world know that this is a brother that when all the celebrities are gone, all the high-profile people, and all the speakers are gone, he will still be here standing to fight the fight, and I'll be standing with him.
Well, I know you will, and I want to thank you for all your wonderful work. I want to thank you for your leadership, and also I know you've been looking out for our guys there who we've sent down there, and I want to personally thank you for that as well, and really appreciate you coming on our program and sharing your insights today, Mike Batchman.
Well, thank you very much for allowing me to.
It's our pleasure. It's our honor. And we will be right back after this with our special report on the situation in Ferguson. This is the Zero Hour. I'm Richard RJ Eskow, and we will be right back. We are back on the Zero Hour. This is a special Zero Hour report on the situation in Ferguson, brought to you by Credo Action and produced by the WEAC Radio Network. And joining us now is Seth Jackson, who is Multimedia Coordinator for the WEAC Radio Network. He is down there with our executive producer, Pete Callahan, down there in Ferguson, reporting on the situation there, keeping that live stream going that you can see that Credo Action has put together and is sponsoring. Seth, thanks so much for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having me.
So how you doing? You keeping safe down there?
Oh, we're doing our best, yeah, things have been pretty calm. So the atmosphere has been very loving. So, yeah, safety has not really been our main concern. But, yeah, we're staying safe. So the only time we've felt unsafe is when the local police come around. That's the only time there's really been any tension. But other than that, yeah, we're good.
That seems to be the theme right about now, is that it's the local police that are injecting the spirit of antagonism and, inflaming the situation with various things they've done and said and claimed and so on, and what they say and what they don't say. And I can understand how that would create tension. But, Seth, you just mentioned something that I think doesn't get emphasized enough in the coverage of this situation, which is you were saying that it's a loving atmosphere there, and that the people who are there to demonstrate and protest, it's supportive and inclusive, right? Isn't that the feeling you're getting there?
Oh, definitely, yeah. The people here, the locals, they've been coming up to us, telling us thank you. We appreciate y'all coming out and bringing awareness to what's going on here in Ferguson. Too many people have just thanked us, not even wanting to be on camera or give interviews. They just want to thank us for being here and shining light on what's been happening. They feel like they've been overlooked, and they're just kind of fed up with it. But they're so happy for out of towners to be coming and kind of letting people know what's going on. Yeah, when we marched, there were people on the side of the road giving out bottles of water. People brought donuts. People brought coffee. The mainstream media has reported it as a very tense atmosphere, I would think, but it's definitely, we've not seen that. The people, a lot of hugs, a lot of people embracing each other, talking about how they want to get something positive out of this. And I know there has been a few people who've been more towards, I don't want to say violence, but just had negative feelings about what has happened, and they're pissed off. I understand that. But the majority of the atmosphere is like, hey, look, we want to do something better. We just don't want to see this happen anymore.
Well, that's so important. And that sense of solidarity, that sense of support, that sense of appreciation. Now, where are you now? Are you in your hotel room? Or are you down there where the live stream is?
Right now we're back in our hotel. We're just getting our equipment ready, and then we are going to participate in a rally, and we're also going to, we're just waiting on confirmation to interview the young lady from Howard who was shot in the face. We were in contact with her people earlier, so we're hoping to get a video interview with her later today.
All right. Is she doing all right? How's her health? Have you heard?
Well, we haven't spoken with her. We've spoken with one of her friends from Howard University who has spoken with her. Apparently she's doing well. I can't really speak to her spirit or her mental state at this point, but she's okay. She wasn't up for an interview yesterday, but today supposedly she's going to be ready, and I think she actually has agreed to do an audio-only interview for some of the mainstream news, but they actually requested that we come and do a video interview for her. So hopefully we'll have a nice exclusive.
All right, and hopefully she'll be feeling well too, and you guys are going to stay safe, I hope. And I know you're getting a lot of support out there, and I don't know what's expected. What do they think is going to happen? The curfew's still on for tonight, right?
As far as I know, yes, the curfew is on for tonight. And we had Captain Johnson on yesterday, and we were trying to get him to kind of tell us what their plans were for the curfew and for those that don't obey the curfew. But he dodged all our questions, so it's still kind of vague as to what's going to happen. But I assume it'll be something similar to last night, and where they had the community leaders and some gentlemen from the Nation of Islam kind of go out before the police and clear the area, ask people nicely to go home, and then let the police come in after that and try to disperse whoever didn't go home. And to my knowledge, last night, everything, the majority of the people left, and it was just a few stragglers that did not want to leave.
And people were saying, or somebody was saying when we were setting the show up, that some of the people who stayed afterwards and defied the curfew didn't seem to be from the local community. That they were white guys from maybe one of the outside groups or something. Do you know anything about that?
Well, I can say before we left, and we left probably 30 minutes before, we actually left the scene maybe 15 to 30 minutes before the actual curfew, that we spoke, we were trying to figure out what people were going to do, and yeah, it was not. We did speak to some white guys and a few groups of people that were not from there that were saying that they were going to disobey the curfew. Now, whether that was them or not, I can't really speak to that. I don't know. But we also spoke to some locals who said they were going to disobey the curfew, but once we told them what we had been told about the nation coming through and the community leaders, they were more receptive to that, and they didn't say that they were going to change their minds about disobeying the curfew, but they were more receptive to it not being forced upon them by the police, and that their own community wanted them to go in for the night. So they were a little more receptive. I don't know if they stayed or not, but it looked like they were listening to what we had to say. So.
Well, that's interesting, and so we don't know yet much, I guess, about the folks who were involved in helping the shooting victim get medical treatment and so on. So I guess there's still a lot we're still trying to sort out in all this, right?
Oh, definitely, yeah. We don't have all the answers or all of what has gone on, and it's kind of sketchy with being down there because. I mean, we don't want to get arrested, but,
right.
It's kind of hard to tell, especially being the media we are. Yeah.
Right.
When we're not the mainstream, and so they're basically treating us as though we are the people, so which we are.
We are the people, so you got that one right anyway. Well, listen, you stay safe out there, and we thank you for all the good work. We thank you for being on the front line, and thanks for coming on the show, too.
Oh, thanks for having me there.
You bet. We've been talking with Seth Jackson, Multimedia Coordinator for the We Act Radio Network, and we will be right back after this with some closing thoughts. I'm Richard RJ Eskow, and this is The Zero Hour. All right, that brings to an end our special report, our special 0 hour report from Ferguson, Missouri. Again, our goal in bringing you this special report today, Sunday, August 17th, was to provide some context for the ongoing news stories we're hearing coming out of Ferguson. Why do we hear the police say one thing and then another? Whether there appears to be strong divisions between and a struggle for power among the various police forces, with the local Ferguson Police Department injecting itself at every turn, even after the governor brings in the state police and so on. So we're seeing jurisdictional struggles and perhaps an overly antagonistic local police force undoing some of the attempts by federal and state officials to diffuse the situation a little bit. What we're seeing, and what I think it's very important to emphasize, is we're seeing a lot of community leaders coming together in a spirit of solidarity and a spirit of cooperation and a spirit of love for their children, including Michael Brown, the shooting victim, love for their community, love for the principles that have led civil rights movements and other movements for justice in this country for a long time. So while we're seeing tragedy, while we're seeing conflict, we're also seeing the surfacing and the flowering of something inspirational that's been part of our history for a long time, which is the peaceful struggle for justice and the commitment to justice. And that we're going to try to bring you both sides of the story now and in the future, not just the immediate events that are going on there in Ferguson, but the forces behind them, whether it's the militarization of the police, whether it's the ongoing poverty, whether it's the sense of hopelessness and despair that needs to be dispelled among the young people of our inner cities. We'll bring you that story for context. We'll bring you the fight for justice and the inspirational and the spiritual and the other motivations that are driving community leaders in places like Ferguson. We'll bring you that side of the story too, and we'll bring you the news as it develops as quickly as we possibly can. Again, this has been a special 0-hour report on the situation in Ferguson, Missouri, brought to you by Credo Actions, produced by the We Act Radio Network. I'm Richard RJ Eskow, and this is the 0 Hour.